Oh, I
Also,
have
we're
a
going to
quick question.
share, I think I'll share the screen with the slides on. Let me test that out real quick.
Also, I have a quick question. So, beside like reading chapter one, doing like essay, case, and like smartboard, is there anything else I need to do for the class?
All right, does that look okay for you?
Yes.
Nice. Very cool. What's up? Yeah, it is extra credit.
So it's not actually.
And it's optional. Yep. So, Jawan, right? Then you sit next to Island. Where's she at? What's up?
Professor?
All right, it's 2 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Thanks for being on time today. Thanks for coming when it's 115 degrees. This will be the only day you see me in shorts. When the heat index is over 110 degrees, I'll wear shorts to class. But otherwise, I try to dress a little more professional. So I hope you'll excuse that today. We've got a lot to cover today with chapter 1. I want to make a few announcements first. We'll occasionally make announcements at the start of class. I'll give some reminders about deadlines and policies and procedures if there's a lot of questions about certain policies and procedures. And then we'll jump into the content. Okay. All right, so a couple announcements. You don't have to remind me to record the lecture. I've already started the recording. It's only recording via Zoom. We have one student who's working on getting their visa issues resolved. So they're out of the country right now. So they're joining us virtually. Great. The syllabus is inaccurate. Some of y'all pointed out I listed class for Thanksgiving. We will not be in class on Thanksgiving. I uploaded an earlier version of that. So I'm going to fix that by the end of the week, and I'll make an announcement. The only changes that will occur will be that some due dates, I think, will get pushed back as opposed to being moved up. And most of those are in the second half of the semester. So there's no immediate concerns about that. Okay. The last reminder, actually, there's 2 things I'll say about smart books, that they are optional. They're not required homework. If you don't do them, it doesn't impact your grade negatively. If you complete them before class, then you'll get 1/4 of a point of extra credit applied to your overall grade. So if you do all 16, then you get 4 percentage points. I typically run that report at like 1:55 right before class starts. Today, I'm going to not run this one until tomorrow morning. So if you forgot to do today's, you can still sneak it in. If you do it tonight, and you can still get the extra credit for chapter 1. But moving forward, it should be done before class. The goal is that you finish it before class so you can discuss with the group because you've read in advance. All right, any questions on smart books? Okay, I know there were some issues with self-assessments. Some people, especially on Macs, have issues. I think it's just Macs in general on Connect. Macs have issues. So we'll address some of those at the end of the class. I know some students have, some of those of y'all who are Mac users have some ideas for fixing that. So we'll discuss it. All right, I want to go over some fun facts that I thought were actually fun that y'all submitted. Some facts that are not fun are that, like, I go to the gym. Okay. There's also a lot of people from out of the country, so that's really cool, but it's not super unique. Here are some that I thought were pretty cool. Kram and Rita twins. They're not twins of each other, I'm assuming. But they're twins in this class, and apparently their twin is not in here. Zaya, are you a twin also? Nice, we got 3 twins. That's very cool. But none of their siblings are in class, so that's kind of weird. They're missing out. All right. Ryan Perez is on the soccer team, but he's not here today. They're actually competing against a team from New Jersey. I thought that was pretty cool. Nathan, where is he at? Nathan makes music. Is Nathan here today? All right, I was going to ask him what kind of music, but I guess we won't know. All right, there's one person here by choice, Sophia. Nice. I'm assuming everyone else is here for required credit. Is anyone else here by choice, taking this class just because? Nice. Yeah? Taha? Nice. All right, welcome to class. That's pretty cool. So I know Sophia's a psychology major. That's my background. My background is in organizational psychology, and that's, I think, my favorite thing to discuss. And like I said on Tuesday, a lot of our class is psychology-based, like personality and conflict and leadership. So I think y'all picked the right class. If you're here because you're supposed to, because you have to be here, then that's still good, because I hope this class doesn't suck for you too. All right. Annette, where is she at? She can draw a perfect circle. All right. Unfortunately, there's no dry erase markers, so I'd have you prove that to us right now. If you can give me a perfect circle by the end of the week, I'll give you not a whole extra credit point. How about a quarter? All right. Henry speaks 4 languages. Tyler speaks 3, right? 4, you speak 4 too? All right, that's pretty cool. Who speaks more than 3 languages in here? Rubisha? Nice. All right, that's pretty cool. If you can speak more than 3 languages, I'm super impressed. If you can speak 2 languages, I'm super impressed. So kudos to y'all. All right, one last thing I want to celebrate. Norelli got promotion recently. Let's give her a hand. I think I saw her earlier. Is she here today? Nice. Congratulations. Very cool. Yep. All right, now some things we hope to gain. So I asked you a question on the exam. It was, what do you hope to gain out of this course? There's a couple things that were really common themes. The number one is how to be an effective leader. Probably like a third of y'all said, I want to get better at leadership skills, maybe even more than a third. That's a very hot topic. And we're going to spend a lot of the class talking about that. So that's good. That's good. Some other people said, I want to learn how to manage. I would say that's almost as many people, maybe a little less. I put them separately. Oh, sometimes we think about leadership and management as being synonymous. Could anybody explain how that might be different? Do I need, oh, Rubisha, what you got? You thinking? Are you trying to think of the word influence? Yeah, cool. I agree 100%. There's a phrase that we use. We say that it's not quite the same answer as Rubisha. I like it, Rubisha's answer a lot. But a common phrase is managers do things right and leaders do the right thing. And what I mean by that is that leaders take care of people, they empower people, they develop people, they support people. Whereas managers are more about like, let's maximize efficiency and get the job done. I think Rubisha's talking about like managers have these admin roles and their only concern is, does the job get done? And leaders have to go a step above that and they have to think about influencing people and motivating people. For one thing, because if you can influence people to want to do something, then they're going to be more effective. And if you can do that, then you're going to be a really effective leader. All right, so that's a side tangent. But leading and managing are 2 of our top concerns. A lot of us also put communication skills. There's a whole chapter dedicated to communication. We'll learn some very basic, but like super important principles about how to make communication effective and some things that can make communication ineffective, because there's a lot of really common mistakes that we make that really hamper our communication skills. So we will cover that pretty thoroughly. Decision-making skills, we're probably the 4th biggest, and there's a half a chapter dedicated to decision-making, so that's good. some things that I don't really care about. Some of y'all said I want to get an A. Some of y'all said I'm just here to get the college credits. That's good. You're gonna hopefully get that out of the course. Okay. All right, so let's dive into chapter 1. A couple questions we're going to answer today. So what is management? What do managers do? What are some challenges we face as managers? What do managers need in terms of skills, and how can we prepare ourselves to be managers? Just curious, by show of hands, who wants to be in a managerial role someday in an organization? Okay. Who does not? Nice. That's awesome. That's a good, honest answer. Okay. What we're going to learn is that managers have a pretty crappy job. They work a lot. They have a lot of responsibility. There's a lot of stress, but they do get paid pretty well for the stress that they take on. Some of us will decide it's not worth the stress in our personal lives, and we just want to work our job and pay the bills and be happy. And if that's you, then you probably don't want to go into management. So, all right, let's talk about if you do. What do we have to do to succeed? And if we don't, what are some skills we can use in our personal lives outside of management and organizations? So the first section we'll discuss from chapter 1 is just kind of defining organizations and the need for management. And then why should we care? The first question for y'all. Can anyone define in their own words what an organization is? Yeah, Sydney? All right, what you got? All right, that's what the book says an organization is. It's very good answer. Any other thoughts? There might not be. That's a pretty all-encompassing definition. A pretty simple one, I should say. All right. If you want to know the answer that might be a test question, defining an organization, you can define it as a group of people working to achieve a shared purpose. Typically, you can look at someone's mission statement or an organization's mission statement and see what is their shared purpose that they're trying to achieve as an organization. And McDonald's is a good example. Their mission statement is to make delicious feel-good moments easy for everyone. So they make cheap food that tastes good. Does it say anything about making healthy food or fancy food? It does not. They have a very specific purpose, and you can debate whether or not they do that well, but that's their shared goal as an organization. All right. One of the main takeaways from this class is that organizations need managers. So the next question is, how would y'all define management? What's the role of a manager? All right, Eric. And what else? There's one more. You named 3 of the 4 functions. Someone remember the last function? Yeah, control. Nice. So if you want to use like the book words, they have to plan, organize, lead, control. How does that relate to the definition of an organization? But yeah. Yeah, to achieve the shared goal. Sweet. Yeah, very good. All right, so let's talk about then the art of management. So it tells us there's a couple definitions for management. There's like the cute saying. The cute saying is that management is the art of getting things done through people. And then there's a formal definition, which we'll talk about in just a second. But I'm curious why y'all think they say that management is an art versus a science. What's the art form? Why is management an art form? Yeah, Khadijah? Yeah. It's always changing. Yeah, can you be more specific? Like, why is it always changing? Yeah, the environment. There's a lot of situational factors that are changing. Kyler, what you got? Yeah, because people are unpredictable. Different, yeah. Do you have something to add, Sydney? Yeah, that's why we think of management as a psychology. like a form of psychology, because like people are very different for a lot of reasons. We have to know what works with these people doesn't always work with these other people. Even within the same organization, people can have different interests and values that can make them respond to your leadership differently. I'm going to use the term leadership interchangeably with management. The book technically says leading is a sub-function of management, right? One of our 4 functions. In my research, we treat leadership as like a higher form of management. And I think you should see it the same way too, that leading is a more kind of idealistic version of management, but I don't want to confuse y'all with the language in the text. It is still one of our 4 functions. Here's the formal definition. There's 3 parts to this definition I want to talk about. Management is the pursuit of organizational goals efficiently and effectively. We'll define those terms in just a second. Management is about integrating the work of people. So people, if you ask like what's the most important resource in an organization, the answer should always be people, not capital or anything else really. We have to use people, and then we integrate their work through these 4 functions: planning, organizing, leading, and controlling. Most of our class will spend talking about how to do those 4 functions effectively. But I'm curious if anyone can distinguish effectiveness and efficiency. Yeah, tell me your name, sorry. Arlette, all right, thanks. Yeah, that's a really good description. So do we meet our goal? That means we're effective. What does that mean for an organization to meet their goal? You can give me an example if you don't want to think of like a formal definition. Yeah, Connor? Making a profit? Yeah, I think that's good. As long as we're staying profitable, that means we're being probably pretty successful. Are there other ways that McDonald's can measure success or effectiveness rather? Pardon? Achieve their plans of what? If you think about I know it's hot in here, y'all. I'm sorry. There's a lot of y'all doing this. It's a rough day. So their plans, if we relate them back to their shared objective, we think about, can they produce cheap food that feels good? So I might look at like customer satisfaction. Like, sure, I'm making a profit, but are people happy with our food? Do people prefer us over Burger King? We'll talk about benchmarking in a later chapter, but there's lots of ways to measure success in terms of effectiveness. Arlette was really spot on with efficiency. That's being smart with our resources. So just because we have the best burger in town, if we're spending 3 times as much to make our food as Burger King, even though we might have more sales, Burger King might be more profitable because they're just being more efficient with their resources. Is that Mike? All right, so what would y'all rather be? If you were running an organization, would you rather your organization be effective or efficient? Efficient? Anyone else think effectiveness? Effective? You do, Mike? Yeah, why do you say effective? Yeah, that's a good way of saying it. I like that. I personally agree with that. However, this is that's a subjective answer. And we'll see later in class that some organizations try to maximize efficiency. They try to have the lowest costs, the highest profits. And the other way to differentiate yourself is to have the superior product. Like Apple makes a superior product, whereas I don't know, what's a cheap phone brand? LG, are they cheap? All right, but imagine you're a cheap phone brand, Cricket Mobile, maybe you sell phones. Your goal is to be the cheapest and you don't care about how good your product is. So there's two answers to that question. They're equally defendable. But if you're going to run an organization, you have to think about which one's my priority. Do I want to sometimes sacrifice efficiency, spend a little more time and energy and money to make a superior product? All right, so that's just some food for thought. So let's talk about the goal of a manager. This, I promise you, will be a test question. It'll be something to the effect of, what's the multiplier effect? You should know this term. You should also know that that's kind of like the big takeaway for how you gauge yourself as an effective manager or not. That is, can you achieve influence that is multiplied far beyond the results that can be achieved by one person acting alone? So if I'm able to motivate a staff of 10 people we're going to produce what's called synergy. Synergy is a term we're going to learn in a later chapter. That means that those 10 people working together can make a better product than if they were working independently. And a lot of times that's because they're being efficient with their time and their energy because they're helping each other out. They're not using redundancies in the workflow. So our job as a manager is to make sure that we can maximize the productivity of a team through the multiplier effect. All right, the next 2 slides, we'll talk about the rewards of studying management, the rewards of practicing management. We won't spend too much time on this, but there's some pretty interesting takeaways that I hope will motivate you to want to learn from this class. So a few things you'll gain, even if you're not going to study, if you're not going to enter into a managerial role, if you just want to be non-managerial, this will still help you in a couple ways. So you understand how organizations work, how your supervisor works. So by knowing things about functions of management, you can understand where your boss is coming from, maybe even help them out sometimes. This one's probably my most favorite. You'll be better able to interact with coworkers, and not just coworkers, but people in general. The same principles that apply within organizations apply outside of organizations. So like using effective communication skills, using social influence, being a decent person. Those things will benefit you in your personal life. All right, managing yourself and your career. If you apply some of these skills from class, hopefully you'll be more productive and efficient and successful in achieving your goals. And then there's a ton of research that shows that managers get paid more. Even if you're not a manager, knowing this stuff has proven to increase your pay quite a bit. Some reasons we might want to practice management. So you and your employees can experience a sense of accomplishment. For those of you who get pride out of producing good work, that's great for you because you have a lot of opportunity in a manager role. You could stretch your personal abilities. If you start to take on roles in management, it's going to be very taxing and at times trying, but it'll force you to get better at certain skills. And then probably my favorite on this slide, you can mentor and help others. So I did, when I was in industry, when I was working outside of academia, we did leadership development for a lot of high school and college-aged employees. And it was their first time in a leadership role. And it was very rewarding for me to see those people develop skills and confidence and the ability to work with others more effectively. So it's very rewarding if you're able to do that for other people. And it's very hard to be in that role where you're helping others if you're not also in a management role. I guess unless you're working in a nonprofit, then that's kind of your job. So, okay, let's move on. Let's overview these 4 functions we keep referencing. So our 4 functions: planning, organizing, leading, and controlling. The book is broken down. So there's certain chapters that will go into depth about each of these 4 functions. But I want to show you all this figure, which is a nice way to look at the 4 functions. And it's got the definitions there too. So we know planning is setting goals, deciding how to achieve them. Organizing is arranging tasks and people and resources to accomplish work. Leading is motivating, directing, and influencing. And then controlling is monitoring, comparing, and taking corrective action. What I like about this figure is that it has these arrows. It shows that it's a continuous process. So there's 2 things we need to learn about these 4 functions. Is that once we get through these 4 functions, we don't stop. We don't just start controlling and then we're done and coast. Typically, we'll go through the cycle of, it's like a feedback loop. So we go through the 4 functions, then we control, then we see what's going on, and then we say, like, oh, things aren't going as well as I thought they would. So let's make a new plan and let's start this over again. Or, hey, things are going really well. Let's keep it going. Let me see if we can improve on this, and let's still come up with a new plan. So we're never stopping. We're never settling. The other thing the book mentions to us is that they don't always occur in a sequence, one after the other. Sometimes you're doing all of them at the same time, especially if you have multiple responsibilities. Let's say you're the general manager of a restaurant and you've got something going on in the back of the house where like you're getting a new oven put in. And in the front of the house, you're training 4 new staff. So you've got these different tasks that require to be at different stages in this process. Cool. All right, I have a question for y'all. In your experience working in organizations, either as a leader or as a non-manager position, where do you think organizations tend to neglect, or which of the four do they tend to neglect the most? There's no right answer here either. Think leading? Do you have any personal experience with that? Yeah, that's not very, it's not a good work environment to be in. You go by Alexis or Alex? Sweet. All right. Taha? All right. Why do you say that? Yeah, you have to account for that when you're organizing. Yeah, I agree with that. Any other thoughts for the other two? Tyler? Hmm. Yeah, I would agree with that. In my experience, there are a lot of bad leaders who aren't good with their interpersonal skills or their soft skills. And as a result, they bring the hammer down. They control way more than they try to influence. And usually that doesn't work in the long run because you stress people out and they don't want to work for you anymore. Am I saying your name right, by the way, Tyler? Sweet. All right. Well, cool. Again, there's no right answer to that question, but I want us to think about if we're going to be an effective leader or manager, then we should try to make sure that we're not neglecting one of these four, because if you neglect one, then you will not be as effective as you could be otherwise. Let's talk about structure. So let's talk about 4 levels of management, the areas of management, and the types of organization. First step, this is our pyramid view of the levels of management. So we have top, middle, first line, team leader, non-managerial. I'm not going to go through and define them all for you because you can see it on the slide. But I'm curious if y'all can guess why does it help to look at it as a pyramid? Yeah, Eric? Yeah, there's like a clear chain of command. And we know that the people that maneuver the company are at the top. Salah? Oh, yeah. That's another good point. I hadn't even thought of that one, but yes. In my intro management course in undergrad, they told us, they said, like, raise your hand if you want to be a manager. Like, who wants to be a top manager? All right, 10% of y'all or less will be a top manager. Half of y'all or less will be a middle manager. The rest of y'all will be a first line or lower. So that's the reality, is that there are, once you get higher and higher, there's less and less jobs, unfortunately. So it's more and more competitive. It's not to say y'all can't be a top manager, but it's going to take a lot of hard work. The point I wanted to make is that if we look at this pyramid, we can see that there is, well, also if you read the descriptions, it's all about how the plan from the top trickles down to the bottom. We'll use the term mean ends chain later on in class, but that's all about how, if top management says, here's our goal, our shared goal, this is our mission statement, how does that trickle down and reach the frontline employees? Because if you have 300 employees down here, no CEO is going to be able to effectively communicate the vision to all 300 people. So they need middle management to start to implement policies within certain areas of the organization. And they need help from their first line managers to communicate that to the teams. So management has to have this clear chain of command that helps carry down the message. All right. This will almost definitely be another test question. What's the difference between functional and general managers? This is super simple concept. I think they overcomplicated it. Oh, you want to answer it? Is it Carissa? All right, what's the difference? Yeah, over multiple areas of the organization. If I'm functional, my title might be HR manager. I'm over the function of human resources. Or in a restaurant, front of house manager. I just oversee the servers and the front of house staff. But if I'm a general manager, then I oversee usually a lot of the managers who are functional managers. But as a more simple definition, I oversee different activities within the organization. So if I'm GM of Red Lobster, I'm overseeing the front of house, back of house. I'm overseeing like shipments, supplies, all that stuff. Cool. All right, so if the test question says your title is HR manager, are you a functional manager or general manager? You would say functional manager. All right, there are 3 types of organizations: for-profit, nonprofit, mutual benefit. We're probably most familiar with the terms for-profit and nonprofit. Mutual benefit is not a term we say a lot, but there are a couple examples I think you'll recognize pretty easily. All right, so the ways we distinguish them: for-profit is exactly what it sounds like. If I'm a for-profit business, I try to make money like McDonald's. If I'm profitable, that's good. If I'm a nonprofit, my goal is not to make money, but it's to offer services. So there's a lot of like organizations that serve the community that are nonprofits. So their goal is to provide a service, but not to make money. That's why they're called nonprofit. And then last is this mutual benefit. So we say, the book says, aids members in order to advance their interests. And I think the best example we'll probably be familiar with is a union. So I know transfers might not have been here last year, but if you were here last year, you might have seen the grad student strike. They're walking around campus, beating on drums. They didn't teach classes. They're a labor union. So the reason they formed those is to protect themselves, to protect the interests of the workers. So they believe they were not being paid enough. They didn't have access to certain healthcare benefits that they needed. And they said, if the university doesn't at least discuss this with us and help us negotiate a more fair compensation, then we're not going to keep working. And if you're a labor union, sometimes that's your last resort to getting your voice heard. All right. Last thing to think about with these different types: profit, nonprofit, mutual benefit. There's this question of do they have different functions if I'm managing one versus the other? And the answer is no. You still do the 4 functions: so planning, organizing, leading, controlling. The only difference is the measure of success. So if I'm McDonald's, it's profitability. What do you think UIC's measure of success is? They're a nonprofit. What do you say, Mark? Profit? No. Yeah. Is it Eric? Yeah. All right. What you got? Graduation rate. Yeah, that's exactly right. So how many students can we graduate? As a nonprofit public university, their goal is to produce students, hopefully well-educated students. All right. Any questions so far? Very good. So let's talk about what do managers do. How do they spend their time? What are the roles they fill and the skills that they utilize? All right, so the first thing learned, this will be to Hobby's benefit. If you don't want to be a manager, we'll learn about why manager roles suck. And they suck because managers are always working. They're always in demand. Do you remember the number of hours they say they work on average? No. Yeah, 62 and a half. The book said on average, they work 62 and a half hours a week. That's crazy. That's like a job and a half. And they work, I think it said 70% of their holidays, they're working a little bit, like answering emails. And over 70% of their weekend days, they have to work at some part in the day. The problem with being a manager is that if something goes wrong and let's say you're the server at Red Lobster. I use that example. That was my first job, was at Red Lobster. Someone used that a lot. So let's say like something goes wrong, but I'm the server, so I don't give a crap. It's my day off, so don't message me. But if I'm the manager, and the buck stops with me, then if something goes wrong, I have to handle it. And I can't just say like, well, it's my day off. So that's what's one of the downsides. The other thing the book told us is that they spend virtually all their time communicating with others. So either by email or in meetings, managers spend usually half the day or more in meetings with other people. Cool. The question is, how do they be successful? The book gave us a few ideas for being successful navigating these challenges. Do you remember any or have any thoughts? Even if you didn't read the book, how do you think someone could be that busy but also be successful? Alexis? Yeah, that's probably one of the most important skills, time management. Yeah, Sydney? Yeah, delegation is also very huge. I would say time management covers kind of these first two, being proactive. Sorry, you don't see my mouse moving. Being proactive and being purposeful. Those require you to be good with your time. I think purposeful is probably the one that we tend to neglect the most. That is like, just because you're working hard doesn't mean you're being productive. So think about if you're going to work hard for a day, make sure that you're achieving some goals and then not just spinning your wheels and feeling like you're busy all the time. Sydney said delegation, that's super important. You can't do everything. I've seen a lot of, especially young managers, fail because they try to do everything for their staff because they don't want to be someone who's bossy. They want to show that they want to work hard. That's a good thing. But you also have to share the load with your staff. That's why you have a staff. The last thing the book recommends is mindfulness. Just by show of hands, who's ever done like Headspace or meditation or mindfulness or anything like that? That's a pretty cool thing. I didn't learn about that till after I finished undergrad. I wish I had learned about it because it's good for if you have ADHD like I do. If you can't stay focused on one train of thought, if you get distracted by tasks, it's really good because it helps you stay focused and ignore those extraneous thoughts. Also, if you're a student, Headspace gives a crazy discount. It's like $60 for the year, so consider it. All right, so let's look at the roles that managers play. All right, so they give us 3 roles here: interpersonal, informational, decisional. And within those roles, there's like sub roles. I promise you, there will not be a test question that asks you for the 3 sub roles of interpersonal responsibilities. I don't care if you know those, but I think it's good if you look at that chart, just like skim it once, because it'll kind of show you all the hats that a manager has to wear. So in certain situations, you have to stress more of your interpersonal skills. For example, if there's conflict within the staff, you have to put on your interpersonal hat, probably your leader hat, and help resolve the conflict between the staff. If there's a new initiative going to be launched within the organization, you have to switch to your informational role. Make sure everyone knows what they need to know before the implementation of that initiative. Okay. The key takeaway from here is that sometimes you have to do different functions to be an effective leader. It's not always just making decisions. I think that's probably the most common misconception of young leaders, is that they think that their job is just to make decisions and they neglect the other 2 roles. It's cool. All right, here's some skills we need. So we've got technical skills, conceptual skills, and our soft skills, aka human skills. A couple things to think about here is that if we want to be an effective manager, we should have them all. But the higher we go up in the chain of command, the more important some skills are than others. Like if you only have technical skills, you're probably going to be a great employee. You might get a bunch of raises. A lot of times our best technical skilled workers, they get promoted, but they lack conceptual skills and soft skills, or maybe they just neglected developing those in their own personal time. And they get promoted to the first line manager and they fail miserably because they're not ready to lead other people. Just because you're good at your job doesn't mean you're going to be good at leading other people. It's really important. The book gives some examples of ways we can work on conceptual and human skills. I think a lot of them are paid courses. I don't know if I totally recommend those. My advice to you would be, if you want to practice leadership, it would be to join organizations within UIC and then go for roles that are in a leadership position. The best way to learn is just to do. All right, let's see. A couple last things I'll say about this. Conceptual skills are very hard to develop, but they're super important if you want to see the big picture. The big picture is a really common phrase you'll hear within management. Let's say, for example, you're working in a factory and you're good at working at your piece of machine in the factory, but when you become a manager, you have to see how the different machines within the factory work together to be more efficient. If you want to produce synergy, you have to have good conceptual skills to see how the parts fit together. And they say our human skills are the hardest to develop, and they are. Some people, you ever watch the show Bones? Might be a little, yeah, nice. That's a good show. It's about a prominent scientist working at the Smithsonian, I think, and she's like the smartest person on Earth, but she can't talk to people, so she's not the most effective leader, even though she's incredibly smart and she knows what she needs to do. Throughout the progress of the show, she develops her communication skills and becomes a better leader as a result of that. I think it's a good example of how if you can't work with people, you're not going to be effective, even if you've got good technical and conceptual skills. All right. Let's talk about traits. So we actually talked about a couple of these on Tuesday, the most valuable skills. And we mentioned cultural competency. That's one of these on the slide here. You gain that from working outside the United States. But the 4 skills up here are the skills that if you want to be a manager, you should work on these 4 skills and also demonstrate these in job interviews. So the ability to motivate and engage others, I would argue the hardest to develop because it requires you understand how people work and how to motivate people to do something they don't always want to do. The hardest job is to convince someone to work hard in a job that they don't like. If you can do that, you're going to be the best leader, I promise. Communication, work experience outside the US, that develops your cultural competency. Because a lot of organizations have diversity in general is increasing, and we realize that diversity allows us to be more innovative and flexible. There's a lot of benefits. The challenge is that if you don't know people from other cultures, it's hard for you to understand how to work with them. So developing cultural competency is a huge skill. And then last, high energy levels to meet the travel demands and the 24-hour mentality. I know there's in the last like 5 years, a push towards quiet quitting. And I would say if that's, if you want to work for the very minimum, be happy with your life, paying the bills, that's great. And I would not discourage you from doing that. If you want to be a manager, and if you want to climb the ranks and be proud of like the highest pay and the most responsibility, that's not going to work for you. You're going to have to be energetic and dedicated while also drawing boundaries. I would argue against the 24/7 mentality. You can do both. You can be energetic and dedicated while also having personal boundaries. I think we'll spend some time talking about that later in class as well. All right. Here are 7 challenges. And I want to move through the section pretty quickly because a lot of these challenges, we'll spend a whole chapter dedicated to them. The whole point of this discussion is to show you that there's a lot of challenges facing managers, that it's not easy, and that sometimes challenges can overlap and make your job really stressful. So let's briefly go through these. First is gaining and maintaining a competitive advantage. This will probably be, I don't think you'll need to know this definition until the second half, till the final exam, but you'll need to know it. One of the biggest goals of management is producing a competitive advantage, which means you're better than your competitors. Either you produce goods or services more effectively, or in some cases more efficiently than they do, and that makes you better than them. The hard part is achieving that. So later on, we'll talk about these 4 strategies. Being responsive to customers is probably the most important. Understanding what people want out of your product or service. Being innovative, having a quality product that is effective, and also being efficient. So that's our first challenge. Second is being up to date with technology. Probably the best example of organizations falling behind technology is taxi drivers. If you think about when Uber came around and Lyft, taxi drivers were not ready to keep up, and they lost a huge percentage of the market share as a result of that. So staying on top of technology is going to help you out a lot, but it's not easy. Managing for diversity, equity, and inclusion. I mentioned already in this class that diversity is continuing to increase in the United States, that organizations are becoming more diverse. A lot of them are becoming more diverse on purpose because it has shown a lot of positive outcomes. So knowing how to manage diverse settings in terms of gender, age, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, if you can manage diversity, you're going to be successful. All right. There's a whole chapter dedicated to globalization. So organizations are increasingly competing in a global environment. So if you're a small mom and pop in the 1950s, you didn't have a lot of competitors except for like the shop down the store. But now we have to compete with stores across the world. That's one of the outcomes of globalization. So we'll talk about ways to overcome and to thrive in a global economy. Managing for ethical standards. So ethical dilemmas come as a result of competing values. If you're a manager and you have 300 employees, they're not all going to value the same things. Not all of your shareholders are going to value the same things. So sometimes you have to resolve ethical dilemmas by making ethical decisions. And that's, I would argue, one of the most challenging things we do. All right, managing for sustainability. So we know that, like I think today is a good example of the importance of sustainability. If you believe that global warming is real, then you'll know that a lot of organizations are stressing being more green with their production. We'll talk about in one of our chapters the UN's 17 Sustainable Development Goals and ways that we can incorporate that into our management. The last challenge is managing for happiness and meaningfulness. We know through decades of research that if people find meaning in their job, they're going to be happier, more productive, they're going to stick around longer, and they're going to enjoy what they do. So the challenge of a manager is knowing ways to make people's job meaningful to them. That's really hard to do. Cool. All right. So again, we're going to spend time covering each of those challenges. Some of them have their own chapter dedicated to them. But what I wanted to do with this is just look at the fact that there are these 7 pretty difficult challenges, and they might sometimes overlap. I'm curious if y'all can think of any examples of how these challenges might compete with one another. What would that look like? I know your name, Maher. All right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So Maher mentioned sweatshop and how that influences our decision to manage in a global environment while also being ethical. If you want to have the cheapest product and you're not going to use sweatshops, that's really hard to do. Yannette? Yeah, that's very true. You can make yourself unhappy trying to be ethical. But yeah, a lot of times you also make other people unhappy. All right, cool. Thanks for those examples. Oh yeah, you got one? Sorry.
Yeah. Because some parts of the world might not be as technological advanced. They might not be advanced technologically compared to others. For example, let's say we already have Tesla in this country, but other parts of the world might not.
Yeah, that's a good point. Some countries might be less technologically developed as us. Yeah, cool. Thanks. All right. We're going to transition. We'll start to talk about career readiness. At the end of every chapter, there's a career readiness section. We're going to present some of these skills that the book considers core skills for your career readiness. There's also some auxiliary skills, and they give us a nice infographic about that. Each chapter, we're going to look at certain career competencies, and we're going to think about ways we can develop those. So today we'll spend a little time just going over what those are first. So we'll think about the skills that are valued, the skills that we have, and the skills that we want to get better at. That'll be different for every one of us. I think this is a pretty cool graphic. These are the skills we need to be career ready. And what they did was they surveyed graduates, so college graduates, and they surveyed employers, and they asked them, do you think you're proficient? And almost always the graduates were overconfident, with the exception of digital technology. Let's take a look at this. These three, teamwork and collaboration, communication skills, and professionalism / work ethic. Look at, oh, actually, teamwork was pretty close. But look at these two. Communications and work ethic. The employers thought they were almost half as proficient as they thought they were themselves. That's based on these employers working with recent graduates and saying like they're based on their preparation in college or their prior work experience, they're not ready for these things, or they need to improve on these things. What I think is cool about this is it shows us that there's this fallacy, which the name escapes me, but we're going to learn it later in class. That we're more confident than we should be in certain things. And we think like, oh yeah, I got this in the bag. And then we get into the workforce and we realize like, oh, this is something I need to work on. The best thing you can do to make yourself a good candidate is to be self-aware and to be honest about your limitations. So if you can say in an interview, like, hey, I know I want to work on my communication skills. It's not something that, I feel like I'm the strongest at right now. That shows the employer that you're self-aware and that you're dedicated to self-improvement. That's way better than being overconfident and then failing to meet expectations. So don't get discouraged by the discrepancy here. These 7 skills, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. These are our core competencies. They're in the middle of this graphic. I know this graphic is a lot to look at, and y'all might not even be able to read it in the back, but it's in the book. We've got our core competencies here, and they're surrounded by these 4 categories of auxiliary competencies like knowledge and soft skills and attitudes. Throughout the course, each chapter is going to hit on some, and it's going to highlight at the end of the chapter, like, all right, so we talked about communication this chapter. That's going to help us with our oral and written communication skills. And maybe also networking. So it'll help you try to apply these to what you need to develop. There are some suggestions from the book that I really like a lot in terms of improving your skills for yourself. The first and the most important is self-awareness. So being honest with your weaknesses, not being afraid to be critical about yourself, learning from educational activities, model others possessing the targeted competencies. So if you have someone who in your mind was your favorite leader, or maybe your parent you look up to a lot, and you can see what are the things you look up to them for, like what are they really good at, and try to model their behavior. That's a really good strategy for developing those competencies. Learning from on-the-job activities, seek experience with student groups and organizations. The best way to practice your skills in a safe place is at university. Because like if you screw up here in student orgs, it doesn't really matter that much. It's not going to tank your career. All right, then the last thing is to experiment. This is true, especially with leadership. People that want to develop leadership skills, I recommend that they experiment with different methods. Leadership is an art just like management, and there are different approaches we can use. People are receptive to different approaches, but also certain people are more, predisposed to using certain approaches. So like, what's your name, Mark? It's like Mark and I might be managing the same team, but I'm better at using one style, Mark's better at using a different style. Like I shouldn't try to use Mark's style because it's not going to work for me. Okay. So experimenting with what works for you is really important. Some 3 keys to success: take responsibility. Don't count on your parents, your guidance counselor. Take some personal responsibility. Engage in reflection. Be motivated. Show commitment. Experiment. Cool. Basically a summary of the last slide. So we're going to keep going. This is the 4 steps they suggest to developing any one of these competencies. So if you pick one on the list, let's say you pick oral / written communication skills, and you wanted to work on that competency, they say you can use this 4-step process. So step 1, pick the one, we picked it, oral / written communication. Step 2, consider how we can use material from the textbook to develop that competency. There's a whole chapter on communication skills. You can learn a lot. You can take away a lot from that chapter. Step 3, implement it. So experiment with your social group. Use different communication styles or strategies, see what works for you. And then 4, the one that people tend to neglect is evaluate your the outcomes. So if you're going to try something new, like you're going to try a new leadership style, you've got to reflect and say, was that effective? And you have to be willing to say, like, it wasn't effective because of what I did. I was ineffective. It wasn't the other person's fault. A lot of times our knee-jerk reaction is to say, like, no, it was their fault. You know, I tried to motivate them, but they just didn't want to work hard. You have to try to not think that initially and say, like, what could I have done to motivate them more effectively? That's cool. Here is a visual saying the same thing we just said. The key thing is willingness. That's a little corny, but they say if you're willing to do it, you can be successful. All right. Last thing I'll say is with everything, if you want to make a change in your personal life, that's really hard to do. Some people believe that people don't change, but I would argue you can change on a lot of these competencies. The thing you have to do to make it stick is to make it a habit. So if you're going to work on communication skills, don't just do it for one day and then be satisfied. Keep working at it. All right. That's a lot. Any questions on the career competencies? Okay. Do this real quick. I'm going to give us 5 minutes to do the self-assessment. Did any Mac users have issues accessing the self-assessment? Okay, if you do, let us know. It'll take 5 minutes as a group and complete it. If you have issues, let me know. After 5 minutes, we'll discuss the results. If you've already done it, just hang out.
What's that?
Time. Take some coffee. Oh, no? That's rough. I drink caffeine twice a day at least. Yeah, that's fair. Is anyone still working? Anybody still working on the self-assessment? All right, well then let's regroup. Let's discuss the results and then we'll get out of here. Did anybody have issues submitting the self-assessment? That's great. That's very promising. Okay. So let's discuss the results real briefly. All right, was anybody surprised by their score? That they were low when they thought they'd be high and motivation to lead? Okay, then let's just by show of hands, who was high in their motivation to lead? Okay, any moderates? Javi, were you low? You don't remember? Come on, was anyone low? Okay, that's good. All right, what I find interesting about this one is that there are actually 3 motivating factors why people want to lead. There's a whole stream of research on, it's called motivation to lead. These are the 3 factors. There's this, what we call affective identity. I see myself as a leader. Those are people who think like, oh, they're asking for someone to volunteer to be a leader. Like, heck yeah, let me do that. Because I like to be the person who others look at to make decisions. There's this altruistic mindset that says like, hey, I'm just going to lead because I think that's what's best for the organization. I don't care what the personal costs are. I also don't care about the glory. I just want to help make things better. And then there's this duty bound that says, hey, I was raised to take responsibility for things, or my religion says I should take responsibility for the group. Therefore, I have this duty, the sense of duty to step up and take charge. So the research suggests that there's 3 different motivating factors. However, y'all just got a high or a low, and it combined your 3 factors together. I'm curious if y'all reading those questions could see the differences, and if anybody by show of hands would volunteer if they think that they are that effective identity. Like, I see myself as a leader because like I like to be in leadership positions. Yeah. All right. Tarun. Cool. Anybody in the altruistic camp? Like, hey, I just want to help out. I don't care what the costs are. Cool. Yeah, that's where I see myself as well. What about duty bound? Sweet. Some of us said raise hand for 1 or more. That's cool too. Okay. I want you to know that just because you weren't high doesn't mean that you're not motivated to lead. It might be that you're motivated for one of those factors, but not the other 2. And then the average is moderate. So interpret those with a grain of salt. As with all self-assessments, interpret them with a grain of salt. They're not truths about you. Cool. All right, that's all I want to discuss for this self-assessment. Before you leave, we have to take attendance. You have to submit the attendance form, Amari. I didn't get your attendance form on Tuesday. There's no selfie today. You just have to submit the form to verify you're here. And I'll see y'all next Tuesday. All right, thanks, y'all. See you next week. What do you mean? Tuesday? Sparky was on the slide. Yeah. All right, see you, John. Take care. So,